Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Angela Daly, WISE Executive Director. Now that we have virtual format, if you're not a member, go to our website, wiseinvestors.org, sign up. The price is right. It is free, and you'll hear about all of our fabulous events. In 1997, a small but powerful group of women met in Orange County to put on an investment conference for women. To their amazement, it was a stunning success. Over 500 signed up for this event, so they knew they were onto something. Fast forward almost 25 years later, and WISE remains true to its mission of financial empowerment for females of all ages and all socioeconomic backgrounds. We do this because we believe that if you manage your money better, you'll have better outcomes, more opportunities, and more options in life. WISE works through organizations such as Girl Scouts, Girls Inc., and universities, putting on 10 to 15 events and workshops every year, reaching thousands of women on different financial topics. Tonight's event is part of our groundbreaking Tearing Down the Pink Wall series, where we gather the best and the brightest to both educate us and inspire us all to reach our full potential. Evidently, doing even the most basic of estate planning, putting together a will, is an anathema to most Americans. 68% do not have a will, despite the fact that no matter what our age or financial situation, we need to have a will. We covered this topic at our last event in August. If you missed it, please watch the video. We had a very prominent attorney here in Orange County give us some very important information. Tonight, we're going to go deeper into the subject and raise the issue that a will is not enough. There's all sorts of other financial and legal and emotional issues that we're going to have to deal with. To take us on this journey, we have an expert who's had more than her fair share of grief. Susan Alpert is a successful businesswoman, author, educator, and serial entrepreneur who tragically lost her husband of 46 years, 2008, to leukemia. But this propelled Susan into a whole new phase of career. And she now dedicates most of her time to helping us, all of us, through these very, very difficult transition situations. I had the opportunity of meeting Susan via Zoom a few weeks ago, and she's one of these people that you immediately connect with and trust. So please join me in welcoming Susan with a couple of bits of housekeeping. First, we're going to take questions at the end. Put the questions in the Q&A box, not the chat box. At the end of the webinar, there is a survey to fill out. If you fill it out, give us your address, you're going to get a copy of Susan's book, Later is Too Late. And finally, there is a part 2 of this program. After this first part of the webinar, we're going to spend a few minutes talking to Susan about her fascinating careers, and that is with an S, careers. So, Susan, first, thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving us your time, and thank you for all you do for so many people. So, you've had a wonderful life, Susan. It sounds like a wonderful marriage, various careers that you were successful at. But you've also had more than your fair share of grief. So if you could just tell us about this journey, your experiences that brought you to this point where you wanted to give back and help people when they experience tragic loss.
Thank you so much for inviting me to participate. I'm thrilled with the organization and thrilled with the opportunity to share a little bit and hopefully give back. It started no place. I honestly tell you this. I wasn't one of those people who said, one day I'm going to write about grief. This was no way that this happened. When I was a young child, unfortunately, I lost a lot of members of my family, an inordinate amount of people. When I was little, my grandparents, but I didn't know what that meant. I just knew that nobody was playing with me anymore. They were crying. So I knew something to do with death was not good. And then probably the most significant was 2 weeks before my wedding when my father died. That was the beginning. And at my wedding, my uncle was taken away with leukemia and died. Another one had a heart attack. 6 months later, my husband's 50-year-old father died. And this went on, and then his sister died. But you know what? I took it as a way of life. I didn't know anything different. I thought everybody went through this. I still had a beautiful life. I had a great life through high school, through college, marriage, and I just thought this was natural. And then in 2008, I realized it wasn't natural. Everybody didn't live like this. And it really was a great eye-opener. When I lost my husband, he was sick for 10 months, that's all. But this was not the man who was ever going to get sick. He was 6'3", golf tan year round, very successful businessman. He was my rock. He was the trunk of the family's tree. And then he was suddenly hit with the most difficult advanced type of leukemia. And within 10 months, he was gone. And virtually in 10 months, who I knew myself to be, was also gone. And I realized what this meant. I just never thought that I would be alone. We were going to live forever. We were two Peter Pans. It was the most difficult time of my life.
You know, Susan, I read this very wonderful quote that said, when you experience grief, it's never what you expect. And that's exactly what you're saying. You didn't expect, even after all of these traumas that you went through, you didn't expect this grief to be what it was.
It was so overwhelming. I also think on a personal level that I grieved for everybody else who had died before that I didn't acknowledge. It was sad, and I, wiped a few tears, except, some more than others. But with my husband, it took everything from me. And it honestly took me a year and a half to get my estate in order. And when I say estate, I want to mention to everybody in the audience, that doesn't mean a mansion. If you own anything, it's your estate. You have a car, that's your estate. If you have a skinny little silver wedding band, that's your estate. And I had, fortunately, more, but unfortunately, I had nobody to help me make sense of it. Now, it's not that I didn't prepare. I
want you to tell us about that, because you also mentioned that even though you spent a lot of time, because you went through so many griefs and deaths, you understood that about an estate and wills and trusts, etc. But you said that even though you prepared, you did everything you thought was right, there were still some serious or omissions that you wish that you would have tackled prior to all of this. So tell us a little bit about that. We all know we need a will. That's common knowledge. But what else is there beyond this will and trust that we have to think about?
You have to know what you have. A will and a trust. And by the way, I have to always insist on this, that a will is not enough. A will is only if you have your sentimental Aunt Martha's clock, that you can leave in a will. But if you have a house and if you have investments, then you need your trust. So you really need both. And I want to emphasize that. And I knew what we had. My husband and I were both very successful. I had a business that was successful. He did too. We had investments, etc. We had a lot. And I knew that. And I knew where all the information was. I didn't know what to do with it, though. That's the interesting part.
Okay, talk to us about that. What do you mean you didn't know what to do with it? Didn't you have a state lawyer, somebody put together the trust? What does that mean you didn't know what to do?
I will tell you, basically, everything was not up to date. My will was up to date. My trust was up to date. Those are all the big things. Who will get your children, whose guardianship, who you want to leave this to, that was all up to date. But we, in our case, had a lot of stocks. My husband was very bright and did not use a wealth manager or an investment. And so I had 120 stocks in my house. What do you do with them?
What do you mean that was your house? Stock certificates?
Yes.
Oh, my heavens. Wow.
I know. That's what I'm saying. This is what was the biggest eye opener. And I hope nobody is in this position. I just assumed, I was a businesswoman. I ran millions of dollars through my company, but I let him do this kind of stuff. Two
Mhm.
people don't have to do it, or do they? That's the question. I could write checks for $500,000 without blinking for my company. But for me, that was the biggest thing.
Oh, now we're going to get somewhere. So, in other words, you left the finances to your spouse, your wonderful spouse. There's your right to people, but you didn't understand that, because that's what's interesting here is that's what WISE is all about, right?
That's
He's
exactly
urging
it.
women to make sure they understand. They don't have to do it, but understand. So, okay.
Exactly.
So go
See,
on.
this is an interesting part of it,
Yeah.
is because I ran a big business and I've been in business forever and ever because I love it. I knew how to manipulate things, but not for myself. And I left it to Larry. I mean, he was great at it. He made us a lot of money with it and all that. But then what do I do with it? How about this stock? And when just a minute for had closed down about 20 years ago. This we took out when our daughter was born, who is now 50 years old. And we started, when he got sick, we started to talk about maybe getting somebody to help us manage. And I said, if you want to do that, fine. So as bright as I was with everything, I wasn't bright enough. I even took everything I had listed in stocks and listed the bank accounts and what we own. And I sent it to New York where my family was, because in case there was an earthquake,
Right.
nobody would find my papers. So I thought I was very
So
cocky about it.
what were the biggest things? So you didn't feel confident enough with the investment part of it. Were there any other things that you feel that you should have been paying more attention to or gotten your arms around?
I
That
will
you
honestly say everything.
everything.
Yes, and I mean everything, literally, because there could have been some businesses, my husband's business. And this is one of the things that I say, is that when you don't know to need everything, but you do need to know about your spouse or somebody else's business, because all of a sudden you can get very blindsided. You need to know about the accounts, everything you have, who to talk to, meaning you just don't call Bank America, hello. You need to know exactly who you need to talk to and what you need to do with it. And you need to know all the little minutia. The big thing is that I knew the big things, but I wish I would have sat down every year with Larry and gone through all these checklists, which I have in the back of my book now. It's checklists of what you need to know, who the people are, who the people you need to talk to get to the people you need, and to update it every year. You talk about, go ahead,
So
I'm sorry.
this would be, you're talking now about a business situation. If one of this people owns a business, right? But so you mean other things like what, Susan, besides like I know like my husband has a business, right? And he runs it, but he has a daughter that's running it too. So, but I still need to know things about the business so that I can be intelligent about it, right? And that's what you're saying here, that you need to get into some of this detail.
Yes, who else is involved in the business? What unions, if there are, or whatever there may be. You need to know some basics with that. But in addition, you need to know about your own life, your insurance policies. Are all your beneficiaries up to date? And because you may have said, okay, my cousin so-and-so is going to be the beneficiary, but they died last year.
Yeah.
And now who's the beneficiary of this dead person? So those are the kinds of things, whether it's insurance papers, whether it's for your car, for anything that you own.
You have to make a list of all of this. And I think what you're saying here is if you don't, you're going to make a lot of trouble. There's going to be in the midst of grief and you're, really confused, you talk about, and, overcome. And now you have really overcome because you don't have all of these details.
Correct. And you need to know those. They need to be updated. And you also need, it's like real estate, location. You may know that your husband has a bunch of bank accounts. Now, where are they? Are they in his sock drawer? Are they in his ski sock drawer or his dress socks drawer? You know, it's silly as it sounds. We need to know where everything is, but not only we need to know, so does somebody else. You and I know people are very, very private. What I did, I have two daughters, and unfortunately, they know less than I do about investments and so on, but they know everything that I have and where to find it. Not the amounts, because they don't need to know that, but they do need to know there's an account here. This is an attorney to talk to about this. And what I did is I put that all together and I update it every year and I mail it to them and said, when the time comes, open this. And that will lead me to another thing. What do you do with your older parents? Now I'm going in reverse. I'm giving it to my kids so that they can have it for their older parents, in this case, me, their mother. When they don't want to, your parents don't.
Yeah.
I'm just going to bring this up.
I think this is a great, great topic here, because this is something that no matter what the age of the children, I mean, obviously adult children, or the age of the parents, we have to have this discussion. And I'm going to preface it, but a friend of mine recently told me that she tried to bring it up, and her mother, who I guess was starting to be in stages of dementia, got very angry. So this is a very important topic here.
Yes, and I do find this a lot. In one of the questions, well, when's a good time to talk? No time, because nobody's going to listen. No, they don't want to hear it. People don't want to hear about their own demise.
Right.
And they think that they've got everything together. And so, honestly, what I recommend very highly, if you have the block and the barrier that your parents won't discuss it. Some do. I know some people who sit down and the kids know where every penny is. Okay, that's not typical. And that's what I do. I put it in writing, because they don't have to confront me. They don't have to confront the whole idea of death and me no longer being there, which scares them. But they'll know what to do and how to do it and where.
But what happens? What is about the situation where an adult child, because would probably be an adult child, goes to their parents and say, you know what, mom, dad, you know, what have you taken care of your estate issues? And what happens if they say, well, I don't want to talk about this, you know, it's too depressing for me. No, don't worry about it. I have it all in a drawer someplace, sock drawer. So what do you do to make sure that, try to make sure, just to not just for them, but to protect everybody in the family, that they got this thing done? How do you push it? In other words, if they're recalcitrant, what do you do?
But the only thing you can do is love. Love is the only thing that will do it. Being didactic and telling them we've got to do this because of that. You know, just what I like is, you know, if something happened to you, what's going to happen to me? I won't have you to lean on. I won't have you there as my support, as my love, my whole past. But I'll have pieces that you leave me, and I don't know what to do with that. I will be heartbroken. I will be stressed. I will be sick. Please, if you really love me, and I know you do, help me for my future. And if that doesn't work, you got a problem, really.
That actually is a nice way to approach it. You know, a really sensitive way to approach it. Yeah. The love. If they're the other topic that you cover in your book, which is fascinating and a lot of drama here, is when the heirs, there are problems with the heirs and the inheritances, and you know how things need to be divided, or it wasn't fair. But you also cite a situation. They're not just family members, but your husband's business partner, who became difficult after your husband passed away, and you felt betrayed by this. So talk to us a bit about how we might avoid these situations. And if we find ourselves in them, how did you deal with this, especially, but on the business side, but also second part of that, Susan, on the family side?
Let me start with the business side first, because that's personal, and I know more about that than I do the family side. Right. We were totally prepared. There was an agreement. There was a legal piece of paper, everything. And what do? And they had partners. what do you do when the other partner says, well, it's 2008, the whole world is going to hell. I can't live up to this agreement, so I'm not going to. What can you do? And then he said, well, I'll just close the whole business down and I'll open up across the street under another name. This is one of the situations. And this was somebody who said he was going to take care of me for the rest of my life. We were like that. Greed is a very interesting emotion because it takes over the sweetest people. At any rate, what can you do? I didn't handle it well. And eventually we had to get an attorney involved. And I was so stressed. It was a sick thing. What I would have done now, which a lot of people gave me advice, and they said, pardon me, screw it. You will live without all that money. It's killing you. And that's a big piece of advice. Watch out for your own health because nobody can do that for you. And let go and know when to let go. And with family, it's even harder. When siblings are fighting and there's no need to, if parents knew what their kids were doing to each other, they would give you the information. They would let you help them make a will and a trust. You can't change anybody, and that's the hard thing. And you'll learn a lot about people that you never thought was true. But you have to, I still come back, and I don't want to be a Pollyanna, but you have to come from the place of love and from trying to understand them. And at some point you have to give in. I mean, you may want such and such, and that would be in a will, but in a trust, if your parents had the trust, this wouldn't be there. And I think if parents knew what grief it would cause their children, I think that they would be more receptive. So they kind of mesh together a little bit.
So in order to avoid these situations, I suppose the situation that you had with your husband's business partner, you had everything buttoned up, but he just said, well, I'm not going to do this. And at one point you just decided to let go. So, but what about for a family, the children? Can we do things like be more specific about who gets what beyond? I hear about people fighting over the most ridiculous things, right? It's not oftentimes not just money. It's something that means a lot to them, and they start fighting. So how could we avoid those situations? Can we?
Not really, because the things that don't seem significant may be significant to you. Dad and I had a conversation once, and we were sitting in the fishing boat and we were talking and so on. You want that fishing reel. I mean, it may be worth nothing, but certain things you can't fight. And it's up to if there's nothing written in your parents' will, you have to hope that you can work it out. And it's really a matter of hope. For example, go around the house with stickies. With you, I would love this sofa. Oh, give that to charity. I don't want that, or something like that. And I have an interesting situation. I have 2 daughters, and they swore to me that they would never fight. They would never fight over anything. You love that ring, you can have it, or I'll share it with you. One year you keep it, the next year I'll keep it. Whatever nonsense. All I did was say to them very nicely, if I pass and you start to fight, we'll never fight. If you start to fight, all of a sudden you'll have a slab leak. You'll get a lot of tires broken. You'll get a windstorm. I just want you to know it's not coincidental. It's me coming down on you, and have that in the back of your mind. So, I try to make light of that a few things, but certain things you can't. You have to just hope that there will be resentment. There will always be resentment. But you don't want to fracture your family, and you don't want to break the cousins apart because the parents are fighting. It's not easy, and there's no simple way, but you've got to put yourself out there.
So talk to us a little bit about the kind of professionals that we need around us during this period. Of course, it depends on how complicated some estates are really easy and others are much more complicated. But beyond the attorney, are there other people that we need to be in touch with?
Yeah.
Accountants or funeral people that do funeral arrangements, church. What do we have to think about?
There are a number of these things. And as I said earlier, I don't care how small your state is. One of the things I did after my husband died, I wish I had been smarter. I put together what I called my team. And it was my attorney, my accountant, the bankers, investment people. I got them all together through email and said, you're all holding a piece of my life. And I don't know who to talk to about what. Would you please agree to be my team and work on my behalf with what you need? So if you need to find out if Form 12 was filed, please don't ask me, ask the accountant, but copy me. I want to know everything that's going on. But I don't want to play the child's game of telephone tag, because I'll probably say, did you file Form 76 instead of 12 or whatever it was? So I had my team work together. And the nice thing is, if you had this beforehand, do you have an accountant? Do you have these people in your life? Do you have an estate planner? And you should, no matter how small it is. And as a matter of fact, you can do this yourself online. There are so many resources that you can, without the attorney, fill out and do your trust. Do you have an advisor? And on and on. Do you have a clergy person who's very close to you who should be part of this? And even if you don't tell them that they're their team, have it ready. And then in a couple of weeks later, you can easily say, please, team, help me. And that worked out beautifully.
That worked out beautifully. You've done so many interviews with people that have had tragic loss, and you recount a number of these stories, many of them in your book. But there must be some threads that run through, Susan, some similarities of people where the omissions, the mistakes they made, the things that they wish they had done that they hadn't. And of course, you've talked about your own experiences. Are there more threads of similarities of things that we do wrong?
I think basically there are things that people, let's go to the older generation, things like knowing your spouse's passwords. How do you get on their computer? How do you do things like that? And I think, to me, I still go back, the most essential part of this is sitting down together and talking about it, and little things. And I'm going to go back to, there were a couple of very young people who they lost a spouse, a skiing accident. One committed suicide during 2008, a banker, no less, who had almost everything together, but one left out one piece. And his wife lost the house, everything, that one piece.
What piece did he have?
One bank account that he had only on his name. He forgot to switch it over. And it was so much in debt and those things. Is everything on both names, or do you have somebody who can come in and step in and have this? We need to know how to protect ourselves, and that's really knowing what the other person knows. And you can, there's something happened. My husband wanted me to close some sort of an account. And this was like a week before he really couldn't do anything himself. And I didn't even ask why. I trusted him and I closed it. And it was fortunate. But the part was that he had the backstory. I never would have closed anything. And it was a good thing because he knew in his head and in private conversations why he had to do that. When somebody's gone, we don't know what was in their head. That's why we need to have these conversations with them. And if it's a spouse, if it's a parent, if it's a cousin, whoever you think that you're going to be responsible for. And I'm just assuming here it's a spouse or something like that, but a lot of people don't have anybody, but they need to designate somebody and work together.
Mhm, mhm.
And again, I think it's the sharing and the updating are the two things that most people hadn't done.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the sharing and the updating, it is important. And, you know, you talked about how everyone has to have a will, no matter what the size of the estate. And we covered that with the attorney. It's so important because if you don't, then all of your possessions will go to the letter of the law. And we said, you know, it could be someone you don't even know, some long lost relative, or, you know, a spouse that you forgot to finally divorce could get everything. So everybody needs to be aware, and you're right, everybody needs to have someone designate somebody.
Absolutely. And you think not knowing about other people who are involved, the simplest of a state is still complicated. And as you say, if they don't designate somebody and they don't have it in your trust or written down, probate is, as I'm sure you've gone over this, probate is long, impersonal, and expensive and heartbreaking.
And heartbreaking.
No, nothing good can come of not being prepared.
You know, you talk about too this, you know, when a loss, people experience tragic loss, that some people are insensitive and say really hurtful things. Tell us how to avoid that. What is the best thing to say to someone? Hug them, kiss them, but what do you say that would make them feel better? And what do you avoid saying that makes them feel worse?
Yeah, you could just never say, I know how you feel, because nobody knows how I feel. You know how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
I lost Larry. You didn't lose Larry. And that's a very interesting point. I'm just going to digress a bit. At the beginning, for a long time, I went to grief therapy because as much as I thought I had it together, I didn't have it together. And I started going to private sessions because that's what I needed. But I went to a group and this one said, oh, I just gave away all my wife's clothes. I didn't need it anymore. And this one said, oh, my husband painted. I just sold all his paintings. And little by little, they're saying what they're giving away. And I'm saying, are you kidding? I lost Larry. You don't understand. And I went after that for private therapy for a long time. And I'm proud of it because it saved me. It really did. The right therapist. But, you know, without digressing too much, never tell anybody, you know, how they feel. He's in a better place. Absolutely not. His place is here with me. He's not in the ground or in fire. He's with me. He's not in a better place. Oh, you'll get over it. Time heals all wounds. Well, that's not true. It doesn't. It may soften it a little bit, and you may not cry 24/7, but it never goes away. Stop telling people that, or asking them, "What can I do for you?" That's so not good. What can I do for you? Show up on their doorstep. Send a package of food that they don't want. Let them throw it out, but they'll know that you care. Of course, give them a hug. Do things like, it may not even be true. I'm going to Staples tomorrow. Do you need some files? I'm going to bring you the kind of files I like. It may help you sort things out. Be proactive. That's the most important part. Be active, be there for them, sit with them. You don't have to say anything. You know, we all like to fill the empty space. When there's nothing happening, we want to say something. You don't have to. Just sit there and say, you know, I'll call you tomorrow. If you don't feel like talking, don't pick up the phone. Let them know you care. And I had an interesting situation in this. One friend said to me, you know, will you come over? And I kept saying no because I wasn't ready. And then she stopped asking, and I didn't hear from her for a year. And then I met her, and I honestly came out and I said, you know, I was very hurt. And she said to me, I was just listening to you. You said you're not ready. So I figured when you're ready, you'd call me. So we have to be careful what we say. um, that's one of, I think, the most important thing. People need to know that you're there. And I think most people know that, yes, you're there, and you may not say anything, but as long as they know that you care, and they also know that after a few months, you're not going to be the center of everybody's life anymore. They're going to not forget you. They'll know you, but you won't be asked out. You're going to be alone an awful lot. Hang on to the people you love and who love you. They'll stick by you.
Are you saying that, sometimes people may think we push them away, so we have to sometimes reach out ourselves?
Yeah.
Like with your friend, you were waiting for her and she was waiting for you. So
yeah. But also, I think people have to realize and expect that everybody's going to get on with their own life. Yeah. And everybody that I know who has gone through this acknowledges it. You're going to have to make another life, but that's a whole other topic.
That's a topic for another day.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's start on that one.
So tell us about you started with positive. What about some positive experiences that you had while you were going through the grief, or perhaps a few months later? Anything happened that you want to share that was good and helped you?
Well, I think the most important thing for me was my grief therapy. And I worked with this phenomenal woman, and I learned about my grief world, which is different than my other world. And I learned how to acknowledge. And for me, going through the pain and the experience was the most valuable thing, because if you don't go through it and you go around it, you're going to come out the other end and start all over again. And I've seen this time and time again, when people don't allow themselves the privilege of spending the night crying and banging their fists or whatever they have to do, or holding on to something beloved of your beloved, and feeling it through you. And I don't mean to sound, airy-fairy with this, but it's very true. We have to experience the pain and the loss. And as painful as it was, that's how much comfort it gave. And and yet my closest friend from New York flew out to do an intervention with my daughter, because they said, start thinking positively, go out and play and do this. Don't dwell, don't stay home alone and go to therapy for grief and all of that. Move on with your life. And I said, that's my life. This is it. And for the first time, I spoke up and said, this is how I'm taking care of me. I don't need somebody to tell me what to do. Because then you start feeling guilty. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm going to hurt myself. I think we have to empower ourselves during this time. And that's what was the most helpful for me.
Getting the grief counseling and going through the grief and empowering yourself to do what you needed to do.
Yes, everybody doesn't. I know people who have not and who have done fine. I know people who have gone to their clergy and have found that good, or have a bestie and they can talk to the bestie. They can cry, friends can listen, they can help, but you can't just bottle it up to yourself.
You have to let it out somehow, some way. Yeah. It works for you.
And be good to yourself, because this is not, we all know about Kubler-Ross and all the steps of grief. Well, that's not true. And they've proven it not true. They're repeating. You'll go through them once, and then you'll go back to depression, and then you'll be fine. And then all of a sudden, fear will enter again. But I went through that already. No, you didn't. It'll keep coming back. But everything softens. And that's the thing. We have to be good to ourselves and realize that it's okay. This is what we have to do.
Well, Susan, this is a wonderful discussion. I'm going to remind people to put your questions in the Q&A box, and we're going to take them very shortly. Darlene March, who's our Chief Operating Officer, And my better half is going to moderate that portion. But Susan, just to tie this up, give us what is the one piece of advice that you don't want us, one takeaway that you don't want us all to forget here? If one thing that you had to have us do, what would that be?
Be proactive. That's it. Participate. Don't have your eyes closed. Don't have your head in the sand. Realize that at some point in time, everybody's going to go through a tragedy, and you don't want to make it worse. And you don't, more than anything, want to hurt your loved ones. Yeah. Forget about hurting yourself, which is horrible. You don't want to hurt anybody else. Just have your eyes open and participate.
Well, it's the title of your book, Later is Too Late. And for all of us, including me, who like to procrastinate, this is maybe our motto: later is too late in this kind of situation. That is really the truth, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Darlene, why don't you start fielding the questions, and we'll see how many we can get through.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. It was really, really to the heart.
There's so much more. There's so much more we have to know, but if we just start, that's the first step. We know what we know about that, the first step. Thank you.
Susan, thank you so much. This was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. Also, as I mentioned before, I just lost someone close to myself, and I know how confusing this time can be for people. So we're getting Q&As piled up in the box. So let's get started with those, okay?
Sure.
Can you also provide tips for aging parents so there is no fighting within the surviving siblings, please?
Sounds like somebody's hurting back there. And the first part of the question, what about the parents? I know that I gather that the siblings are fighting. What was the first part?
Aging parents, tips for aging parents. So there's no fighting within the surviving siblings.
Well, again, back to having the conversation and on the important things and the things in the will. And I think it's important if the siblings if they can have a conversation beforehand or between each other beforehand. When mom and dad pass, it's going to be terrible. But you know what? I've always loved such and such thing, such and such piece. Would you mind if I take it? You take something else. I mean, you can start by trying to share and be loving. There's no way you're going to stop siblings from fighting. You want to minimize it, though. Unfortunately, it's a hard thing. Greed comes in, and a lot of this comes into mom loved you more than me. Dad loved you more than me. Well, maybe, yeah, I was the favorite child. And so you're going to start opening up a lot of negativity. But I really don't think that there's any way that you can stop them from fighting other than coming again. And I hate to sound so philosophical, but coming from a place of love and understanding of the other person. That's the only thing.
Thank you so much. Okay, let's move on. This is a good question. What is the simplest thing to do and not overwhelm ourselves to start with, please?
Okay. I would start basically with my will and my trust, because that's going to open up a can of worms of other things that have to be done. If you have a will and a trust, make sure it's updated. Go to the attorney or however you do it, make sure it's updated. And then make sure that you have all the information that you need. Social security numbers, birth certificates, discharges, names of doctors, but that can come slowly. And one of the things that I did at the back of my book, and this has nothing to do with the book itself, is these things that you need to know in forms and so on. I have a confession. I don't use it. I don't use these forms because they don't work for me. I have my own way of putting down this information. And if you look at from mine or from lots of banks and state attorneys and accountants give you checklists of what you must have. Look at those, and then they will tell you what to do in what order. I mean, you need the basics, the Social Security, the health insurance. You don't have to start it all at one time, but get one of these books and see, or pamphlet, look online. Almost every Social Security will have it. Any investment, any bank, they'll have that. And they will give you the knowledge of what you need to know, and then put it down in any form that you can.
Okay, all right. Can an account not be transferred to a spouse, or at least go through probate, then be transferred to a spouse? That's interesting.
Again, one more time.
Okay, I guess maybe I need to talk a little louder. Can an account not be transferred to a spouse, or at least go through probate and then be transferred to the spouse?
You know, I have a couple of thoughts on that, but truthfully, I am not an attorney. And I think this is an attorney question. I don't understand really why you wouldn't have it in both names and then want to put it in both names. I really am not clear on that. And I think it's an attorney question.
Okay, how about, can you recommend a good estate, can you recommend a good estate attorney in Orange County? And I think we just had someone, well, I don't think, we had someone here just recently about who was the first part of this series. So we will put that name up so that she can see it, Jackie Nucio. Now, do you have any other suggestions about how to find a good estate attorney?
I have always found one of the best resources are people you know who will give you a referral. I can give you a referral of somebody that I know who is very good for me, but maybe not for somebody else. And one of the ways I got this one was from my accountant. I asked my accountant, get a referral from somebody who's knowledgeable. I wouldn't go, I mean, I'm sure you can go through, I'll show you how old I am, the yellow pages, or you can go online and you can look. But if you have a banker, anybody, go to a professional unless you have a friend or a relative who is using one and is pleased.
Okay, I think that just about does it. Should we move on now, Angela, to talk about how did you get in this business?
Yeah, we can now talk about Susan's fascinating. I'm fascinated by all your different stages in life. Tell us let me take you back to when you were in college at university. Did you have what did you think you were going to do? Did you have a plan, a path that you wanted to go down as you graduated?
Great question. Because I tell my grandchildren, don't worry about what you're going to do now, unless you're going to be a doctor or a dentist or an attorney and you have to start studying now. Don't worry, go with your interest and it will. So I became a school teacher because that's what everybody in my area did. I was very lucky. I taught intellectually gifted children, so that was nice. And I thought that's what I was going to do. And then I got married, got my degrees, did everything, and then said, I don't like this. This is not for me. And my
how old were you when you decided this wasn't for you?
24, probably.
So you just were just out of school. You gave it a couple of years.
Yeah, I did, and it wasn't right. And then I had children. I thought I'd stay home, and that was not for me. And that didn't go over well. It went over well with my husband because that was that generation. I was supposed to be home. I didn't like sand. I couldn't play in the sandbox with the kids. I was a lousy baker. What was I going to do? So eventually I went back to teaching part-time and when we had moved, and I said, I'm not going to do this. And then I was taking a class, and I was sitting in a chair for a left-handed person. And I said, this is terrible. I'm not left-handed. I'm going like this. So I started a business, a catalog business called Left-Handed Compliment. And I sourced and had articles made for left-handed people. And then I started a business for left-handed people, and I got books on knitting. I mean, you name it, I did that. And that was fun for a while. And then somebody said, are the police chasing you? I mean, you're starting something else now. I started an executive buying business. And then I got into the motivation and incentive travel business, which I loved.
Oh, how did you get into that? How did that happen? Because we get this now that you saw a need, so you did the left-handed thing, and
right.
But how did you get into the travel business?
Very interesting. I had started with this executive gift buying, and I had women working for me, going to executives, and that was then. And then I was reading the paper, and there was a company applying for a license, a motivation company, and a travel, incentive travel, and merchandise. And they had read about me in something, and we had lunch, and I formed a corporation, pretty large one, with these 3 women. And I was in charge of the pots and pans, so to speak, the merchandise. I didn't like that. So I became in charge of the travel. And then I owned a travel incentive company, and then another very large one. And that was my business and my love for 30 years.
Well, tell us a little bit more. What does this mean, business, travel incentive business? What is that?
Yeah, sometimes I get embarrassed because it was the most glamorous life you could imagine. I just happened into it. I put together with my team programs where corporate executives and so on would give the carrot at the end of the stick to their employees, sell more cars, and you'll go hot air ballooning over Paris. You'll have a safari with in the middle of the desert, whatever it is. Somebody had to put together all these programs. We had to figure out all the math involved of who would get it, do all the promotion pieces, all these great mailers, which we learned to mail to the wives, because that would make their husbands go out and work more. You have to remember, I'm still I'm 80, so I'm from another generation, and we knew our market, what to hit. And then we would arrange for all the travel. I had a travel division, and I had a limousines division to pick up these very important people. And of course, I had to go check them out. I mean, somebody had to make sure they were right. And Larry came with me. He had his own big business, but he could come with me. Somebody had to make sure that that road that you were going to take to the Taj Mahal wasn't broken this week. So I was very responsible. And I did this for 30 years.
For 30 years, you did this?
30 years. I had
wow.
A phenomenal staff.
But okay, so you went from being a teacher, right? And then there's these businesses, catalog. So who encouraged you? How did you know I can do this? Did you have a mentor, a sponsor, your husband? Who was telling you, Susan, you can do it? Nobody?
Nobody. And I think it's interesting because I do mentor people now. Oh, I forgot to tell you, I worked as an assistant therapist also, because I love that. There were a number of things, and it's like, it's crazy, but I had nobody, and I had no role models. And it was interesting. And it's the same thing when I closed my business when Larry died, and it was 2008, and nobody was doing these incredibly expensive trips. And so I closed it, and I tried to do other things. I said, I'll get hobbies. I'll take pictures. I hate photography. I'll be a gardener. That doesn't work for me. I couldn't find my niche. I couldn't, until one day I realized I learned something from this loss that can help people who are struggling like I did. And I wrote booklet on, and I was going to publish it on chaos to control, how to put this together. And I did it. And the same time, some other things were written by very famous people. And I said, I'm not going to be a number on the shelf. Who's going to listen to this little redhead from Newport Beach, whatever it was. And then I decided I had something to say. I'll write a book. And that was it. And then I wrote 3 books as a result. So I have to honestly tell you, I wish I had had a mentor. Maybe I would have skipped a few steps in the middle with all the, but I don't believe it. I really believe we get to where we are by the foundation of what we've had before. And now I go out of my way to help others.
So now you're a role model, Susan.
Well,
yes, people can look up to you in so many ways and starting different businesses. And now, dedicating yourself to helping others. You've turned to really to volunteerism and community service. And it's a wonderful path after your successful businesses.
Yeah, but it was fun doing the other things too, I have to tell you. But no, I keep feeling that this is what I've been supposed to do, this part, and that is just giving back. And it's only by hard experience. But I wish I could say I had a great mentor or anything. The only role model I can tell you is my principal when I was teaching the first year, and he would walk in unexpectedly. It's funny how this is coming back to me. He'd walk in and I would know I better be up on my feet doing something and not sitting down and doing something. So I got to have a very good work ethic, which I've always had. And that's it. If I want to do something, I will do it.
Well, let's close with, give us a piece of advice. You gave us a piece of advice on, preparing for and dealing with the loss of a loved one. What about career path? What advice do you throw out to, doesn't have to be to the young ones, anybody? What advice do you give us?
I always think about, and I tried this also, what do you love? What do you love? Because as we all know, if you love something, you won't work a day in your life. You'll just be doing what you love. But that's if you're serious with this. Unfortunately, in economic times now, a lot of people have to do things for more survival than for love. But if you have a choice, go to an area that interests you. It doesn't have to be a particular job, but does ecology interest you? Does architecture, those buildings fascinate you? Take a little menial job if you want to, or a bigger one, but try and do something. And if you don't like it, move on.
Yeah, we've heard that, and we had the attorney that spoke to us in August had a job in technology, public relations, and just, even though it was a glamorous, interesting, she just didn't like it, and just decided, well, I'm not going to do this the rest of my life. I'm going to move on and, take a few steps back and start all over.
Okay, I did PR also for a few years. I just kept trying.
Trying until you found it was the travel business that was your love for many years.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We had traveled extensively. I started traveling when I was very young, and I've always loved it. And I didn't realize that you could make it into a career. I wasn't a travel agent, and that's the difference. I didn't sit, and plan itineraries, but I found a niche in an area that I loved.
Well, Susan, this has been a wonderful event, and thank you so much for joining us. Thank all of our participants. And if Casey, who's a wonderful CMO who put this whole thing together, gets on the screen so everybody could see her, and Darlene, and there is a survey now that we're going to put up on the screen that if you fill it out and give us your address, Susan is going to make sure you get a copy of her book. Later is too late. So
thank you so much. I feel privileged to share this, and I'm sure there's lots of things that I've left out. I can't, because we all know so much, and I hope that it just stimulates and sparks somebody to take a little step. Every little one will help. Thank you.
Thanks to everyone, and don't forget to do the survey.